Hello, welcome to the North Church Parent Podcast. My name is Christian Veléz. I'm the student pastor here at North Church, and we have created this podcast to help you parents navigate difficult conversations with your children. And I'm excited that you're here with us. And let me tell you that we are in every digital platform: Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure that if this is blesses you, for you to send it to somebody else. We are having a great conversation today that I'm excited. I have Kandi Jones with us, and she oversees our North Kids area here at North Church. Kandi, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for having this conversation that I know is going to bless a lot of people today. Can you tell everyone that is watching and listening what you do here at North Church?
Yes. So like you said, I am over all of kids. So from birth through fifth grade. So that's basically what I do. That's a lot. There's a lot of things that go along with that.
And let me tell you that Kandi and I did the very first podcast here at the North Church Parent Podcast. And we had a great conversation about how to have the conversation about sex with your children. And I want to encourage you to go and watch that, because she gave us incredible advice on how to have the conversation, where to have it, what to say, what not to say. So make sure that you watch that. And I'm glad that you're here with us today. And we're talking about parenting. As you know, we have centered this podcast around Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it. And normally we always talk about how to have conversation with children, and last episode we talked about sin, how to have the conversation about sin with your children. Today we're having a different kind of conversation. This conversation is more for parents, and it's a question that was submitted to our email, parents@north.church. And I want to say thank you so much. And we want to answer your questions. But before we go into the question, I'm going to touch this to Christian Melman, one of our North Kids coordinator, and he is going to do our icebreaker.
Hey, Kandi, I'm so glad you're joining us for our parent podcast today. I'm excited for this conversation we're about to have. I'm going to ask you an icebreaker question real quick. And it's a little bit of a trick question, but me and Tressa do not count, as you are our North Church mom here as our director and oversight. But how many kids have you raised? How many kids have you raised? I'm going to throw it back to you.
Well, that's a fun question. So actually, I have raised 4 children. Well, I haven't quite raised 4 children. Okay. I have 2 still in my home, but I have raised 2 that are now adults, and I have 2 more.
Yeah. And those 2 are not your children.
Correct.
And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about how to raise children that are not your own. And maybe you're watching and you're raising your own children, but you know of somebody close to you, close to a family member, that is raising children that are not their own. And I'm excited to have this conversation because as a student pastor, I talk to many families that are raising children that are not their own. Or maybe you're a grandparent, right, and you're raising your grandchildren as your own. Right. And I'm excited to have this conversation. Tell me a little bit about the 2 children that you raised that were not your own.
So my husband and I, Todd, we actually took in my niece and my nephew. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what year it was, but they were 6 and 10 when they came to live with us. So my nephew was 6 and my niece was 10. So, just the easy years of childhood.
At least you probably didn't have to change diapers.
That's true. That is true. That is true.
So tell me about how was it in the beginning stages of that transition of getting the children to you, because they have mom and dad and now they are coming to live with you.
Right. So Todd and I were not parents. We had been married for several years at that point, but we were not parents at that point. So taking in kids, a funny story I have, every time we got in the car to go to school, I was like, do you have your shoes on? Does not everybody have their shoes on? Like, I just like, it's a lot going from taking care of yourself to having to take care of other people,
I can imagine that, because yesterday I made breakfast and I left the house and I had to call Natalie. Can you make sure I turn off the stove? I can imagine having children, did I do this? Did I do that? Did I close the garage? Yeah. Which I normally I'm out of the neighborhood and I have to come back. I don't know if I closed the garage. I can imagine.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Luckily, they were able, I was a teacher at the time, and they were both able to come to the school where I taught. So that made things a little easier. Yeah. That transition was a little easier. I was able to put them in classrooms where I knew the teachers and I knew those teachers were going to support them well. But it was a big transition for us, for sure.
I'm sure going from no kids to kids that are in school.
Right.
That you skipped a lot of steps into it. And a lot of parents that are raising children that are not their own, not everyone get them when they're babies.
Right.
You know, some of them get them when they are 6
Older.
through 10 or even in the teenage years. And each stage brings its own challenges. Now, I've never done this before, and I wouldn't know, how did the families and friends support you in this transition while you have the children? Because I would like to support the people that are around me. I know of friends that adopted or are in the foster care system trying to, foster kids. How can we help out? Because it's a different set of challenges than when they're your own children.
Right. So, like I said, we went from having no children to having children overnight. Yeah. And they came with a very small bag of stuff, very small bag of clothes. Maybe a few toys, like I don't even remember very much. So, and that's pretty typical. They were not in foster care, but that's pretty typical when you take in a foster child. They usually come with nothing. My friends at school actually threw me kind of a baby shower, and they knew the ages of the kids. And so they just bought us things that we needed, that you need when you have kids in your house, and that was just so amazing. In addition to that, our small group just rallied around us and loved those kids like they had been there all the time. Good. And it was so refreshing and so needed. One thing, if you aren't in the situation and you want to help, one big thing I would say, like Todd and I went from just being us to being us with kids, and we really needed time to ourselves. So because
you're used to that, and all of a sudden it's like,
offering a date night maybe, or just help. How can I help? Can I bring you a meal? Yeah. Can I, whatever it is, because there's a big transition period in there. If not the entirety of the time that those kids are with you, it's difficult.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know I have friends that are doing some of that, or they're raising their siblings, children. And I'm always like, I don't know what to do. What can I say? What can I not say? Right. What do they need? And I think just being open and offering the help from time to time could help a lot. So community is important.
So important.
You talked about your small group. How important was having that spiritual family support in your life to pray with you?
Oh, so much. Besides, there were a few pastors at church that I spoke to quite often. In addition to that, just having small group leaders for my kids too, having that extra adult that was speaking into them was so important. But there were so many things that happened, things that came up that were out of our wheelhouse. I remember Todd and I often sitting down and going, what are we doing with this? And we really tapped into counseling. We had a wonderful Christian counselor that we saw. Sometimes it was me, sometimes it was Todd and I, sometimes it was just the kids, sometimes it was all of us. And we really thought that really helped. There are just things that you are not equipped to deal with. And sometimes you need a professional, whether that's a counselor or a pastor or getting advice or thoughts from someone who's been there is really important.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, what is something that you wish you had thought on regard of raising them?
So before they came to live with us,
Yes.
well,
And how can you encourage somebody that is doing this to think about these things?
here's the thing. Anytime a child leaves their home, no matter how, I don't want to say bad, but no matter what the circumstance they're coming from, anytime they're leaving their parent, the parent that's raising them, and going into a new home, is trauma.
Oh, yeah.
There's probably likely more trauma that you don't know about that starts bubbling up as you move, forward. And it takes so much grace and so much patience and so much love for you to be able to deal with that in a healthy way. We leaned on counselors a lot. I remember going to my counselor every week, just, what do I do with this? How do I handle this? Because you can't, now that I have kids of my own, I do not, my kids, I can do certain things, say certain things to them, respond to them in certain ways that I could not with my niece and nephew.
Because of the trauma that they
Because of the trauma, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the experiences that they came into my house with,
Because they probably had memories.
So many. And imagine if you were to up and leave your house and go live with someone else. That's a lot. Everything has changed for my niece and nephew. We moved them to a different state. They lived in California. We lived in Nevada. And so they had to change friends. They had to change schools. Everything changed for them.
I can imagine, because when I moved here from Puerto Rico to here, it was a shock. Right. And I came with my family.
Right.
And how difficult that was, being unplugged from everything that you know, and now you're in a different place with a different set of parents. Right. So there's a lot of trauma involved into that. Now, you talked about canceling, going with them. How beneficial was that for you and Todd as a couple, and how beneficial was that with raising the children?
I don't think that our marriage probably would have survived this without a counselor. Looking back, that was the hardest years of our marriage. And we've been married for 24 years this summer. And that was so difficult to step into that position. We had no idea how difficult that was going to be. It puts a lot of stress on your relationship. Like I said, just the change from it's just the two of you to, now there's these other people who are around all the time and that need to be fed and need to be cared for.
And probably a different schedule than you.
Oh, definitely. It was really, really hard. And making time for our marriage was important. And, how do you do that? I have these kids. Can they stay by themselves? I don't know that we weren't parents. Yeah. How do we figure all this out? And luckily our community stepped up and really helped out with that. But it was rough. And I will say that my nephew lived with us for 3 years, and then he went back to his mom. Yeah. My niece lived with us for 6 years. So from 10 to 16, the easy years of raising a girl. So now that my girls are encroaching on teenage years, I'm like,
you've been there before.
We've done this. We can do this again
in a different circumstance.
Exactly. That was much harder. I hope.
Yes.
I hope. So
yes.
So
I always talk to parents and honestly friends the importance of professional counseling, especially Christian counseling.
Absolutely.
Because that use scripture to help you. I am so for it because, for example, me and Natalie, we go every quarter for 2 marriage counseling, and it has helped us so much. And it's just a great reminder for me how I have to love my wife like Christ loved the church.
Right.
And I cannot imagine, honestly, surviving our first couple years of marriage without counseling. And being in a situation like you were,
right?
How important that was for your marriage, how important was that for the children that you were raising. So if you are part of North Church, or if you're not part of North Church, but you're watching this, you can reach out to us. We have a great groups of counselors that we recommend, that we send our church family to,
we see.
that we see. So we want to make sure that that's also available for you. So make sure that you reach out to us if you need it, if you know of somebody that need it as well. Now, let's talk about the relationship with the family, with the parents. So the question that I have is, what did the relationship with the biological parents look like?
Okay, so
because I know that's different for everyone.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It really is different in every single situation. In our situation, we were really hopeful that these kids were going to be able to be reunited with their mother. But their mother at the beginning had to go into a mandated program. Yeah. And so she was not available. These kids were either going to live with us or they were going into foster care. Yeah. So that was difficult for us. There was a solid 2 years where there was no communication. For us, we went through the process of getting permanent legal guardianship because of the situation. We wanted to make sure our focus was on the kids. We want to make sure that they're safe, that they are in an environment where they are going to be thriving, period. And so that was the way that we could protect against that. And so when it was my sister, when my sister started to reach out and start communicating with the kids, we let them communicate as often and as much as they wanted, but we lived in 2 different states. So it wasn't like she was down the street. Yeah. And I'll also say, before these kids lived with us, they spent a lot of time with my parents. And so there was some boundaries that had to be made there too, because you don't need to parent these kids anymore. Like, we have said, we're going to do this. Yeah. And so I remember having that conversation a lot with my mom. Nope. Like, this is not your decision. Yeah. Like, we got this.
We're trying to build structure.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's hard when you have all these voices thinking that they want to, insert themselves. And sometimes those are good voices, but sometimes you just need to pray and be a couple and come up with those decisions on your own. And so that was hard. And then reuniting with mom was really, really difficult. I remember the day, my nephew really wanted to go back and live with her, which is why he left sooner. And we, of course, were like, we support that. We want you to be reunited. And so we went to court, and it was so heartbreaking for me because I didn't know what the future held. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure I cried for 2 weeks after that. Wow. Like, did I make the right decision? Wow. What if we did the wrong thing? Yeah. And I know, like, it's not in my control. Yeah. Like, it's not. Like, God's got this. But it's really hard when you're in this situation. These kids have been plopped into your lap, and then you're like, okay, and now they're gone. And that is heartbreaking. It's almost a grieving process you have to go through. Yeah. And I know I have lots of friends who've done foster care, and that it's the same, really the same for them, like that grieving process. Yeah. But I would say boundaries are the most important thing, and like I said, like we said at the beginning, it's every situation is different. Yeah. So whatever those boundaries need to be for you to keep your family unit healthy.
Make it really clear.
Yes. Yes.
Black and white. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's a lot of things I didn't know. I know people that are raising children that are not their own, but sometimes I don't understand the situation that they're in, and sometimes I don't know how to help. And that's the whole idea of this podcast, is to help you parents, or for you to share this with somebody that is going through these things. Because one of the things that I've heard, you need community. Kids are gonna come with trauma. You need to set boundaries in those relationships that you have. Now, what would you tell parents that are raising children that are not their own? Because you already done it. Right. They don't live with you anymore. Some of you are now getting them, or it's been a year or two since you got them. What would you tell them?
I would say hang in there. Like it's difficult.
Yeah.
And, all the things we already talked about, lean into your community, let people help you. Don't feel like you need to do it all on your own. I don't think that's how we're meant to walk through this world.
Yeah.
And so let people help you.
Yeah.
And just hang in there and remember that even though you might make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Like things can be, even if you lose it, you can still regain that trust and that confidence afterwards. It's not the end of the world. And I'll tell you that we did not do it perfectly. Like there are situations that I can point to and said, that was terrible. Like I really messed that up.
Yeah.
But these two kids that we raised are hard-working adults now. They have good jobs. They live on their own. They support themselves. And so I can look at that and say, okay, I played a part in that.
Yeah. Well, with the scripture I read in the top, you only experience that for several years. Train up a child in the way that he should go.
Right.
And even when he's old, he will never depart from it. They might only live with you for 2-3 years.
Right.
Or they might live with you 18 years.
Right.
They say, as a parent and as a Christian parent, we have that responsibility to train them in the right way. And at the end, they make their own decisions.
Right.
You said something the other day when we were talking about this podcast, and you said how you're supposed to live.
Yes.
You remember?
Yes, I do.
To me, it was like, wow.
And this is something I really took from this situation in my life. When you are raising someone else's children, when you are fostering children, you have to live every day like these kids are going to be with you forever. And you have to live every day like they could leave tomorrow. And which means you have to be totally content where you are. You cannot look too far into the future, and you can't assume that they are going to be with you forever. And that was a big life lesson for me at 20 something years old, and so that was tough. Yeah. But I feel like now fast forward, 10, 15 years, and I still live that way. Yeah. I still live in that contentedness of we got to live right here. This is what God gave us, and this is where we are. That
is so awesome. When you said that the other day, I was like, oh wow, that is good. Because that's an encouragement for you parents that are raising children of your own. Live today like they're gonna be here forever, but also live like they could live tomorrow.
Right.
So, because that way you will love them 100% instead
every day.
They're gonna live in 2 weeks. No, we're gonna love them regardless. So, Kandi, thank you so much for joining us, being part of the North Church Parent Podcast, for everything that you do at North Kids. Can you tell parents about the moms group that you have?
Yeah, I lead an amazing moms group.
And
I will say it is, I do not attribute any of it to me. Like, it is all God. We started, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago with 5 moms. And from there, we have built a group up. And I think there are 30 moms on our roster right now. We meet Tuesday mornings from 9:30 to 11:30. Some of our moms have little kids, and so we offer free childcare here at the church. And we do all kinds of things. We do studies together. We go to breakfast together. We do service projects together, all kinds of things, and just grow together and learn from each other and support each other. And it is the most amazing place. I know that there are lots of moms that have come and go, because their life has changed. And everyone that I talk to is like, there's a special place in my heart for this group. And it's so special. I wish, and my goal, honestly, is that every single stay-at-home mom at North Church would be in this group. Yeah. Honestly. Yeah. It's so good.
And you don't have to have babies.
Nope.
For moms. It's awesome to see. So if you would like more information, you can also send us a message in the email. If you have any questions that you would love for us to discuss, Send it at parents@north.church, and we will talk about it. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember to like, subscribe, and please share this episode with somebody who needs to hear this, or somebody who has somebody close that are raising children that are not their own. Thank you so much for joining us.